I want to start the show off specifically, as I mentioned yesterday, before we aired the entirety of Charlie Kirk's Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony. I mentioned some words from the Declaration of Independence that I think are extremely important and need to be considered by everybody because it is a living document that allows us to guide the way forward in the American idea. I want to first start off by playing a couple clips from Erika, actually one clip from Erika, then I'll kind of restate what it is that we're talking about in the Declaration of Independence. Now, I recognize you come to this show and it's probably late at night where you're at to see some levity and some humor, and we will get there. Like I said, there's one specific individual that we should deport immediately, and I think you'll like that. But first, I do think that this is a foundational thing that we should all be in understanding of, and I think Erika highlighted it so well yesterday that we should expand just a little bit more on that. So watch this clip from Erika yesterday, and we'll kind of get into the Declaration of Independence and some more heady philosophy than you're probably used to seeing on this show. Watch this cut 2, I believe.
The very existence of the Presidential Medal of Freedom reminds us that the national interest of the United States has always been freedom. Our founders etched it into the preamble of our Constitution, and those words are not relics on parchment. They are a living covenant. The blessings of liberty are not man's invention, they are God's endowment. Charlie lived for those blessings, not as abstract words, but as sacred promises.
She said that so perfectly. I know she's mentioning the Constitution, but I think the Declaration of Independence puts it a little bit more succinctly. So the words I said yesterday were we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator, which we'll hit on again in a little bit, with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is exactly what Erika is mentioning, and it's exactly what I think we need to hold on to as a part of understanding what the American idea is. Now, as a part of that, what we need to understand is there are these things called first principles. It is the thing that you believe wholeheartedly because they are objectively true. Now, the beginning of this little statement that's from the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. What does self-evident actually mean? A cursory understanding is, well, this is obvious. Of course, this is obvious, and everybody knows this in the way that it's obvious that the sky is blue. It's obvious that water is wet. All of these things are obvious. Yes, kind of, but that's not technically what self-evident means here. Yes, it's obvious, but it's not obvious to the plain sight of any individual. It's obvious after you've thought and you've reasoned with these centuries of human thinking, the centuries of philosophical and religious thought. Only after you've reckoned with all of that do things become clear and obvious. And that's what the founders meant by self-evident. It wasn't obvious that men are created equal to the plain person's eyes. Actually, it's quite the opposite. If you look through the history of humanity, not everyone was equal. That's not a thing that existed in the course of human history up until the American experience started, the experiment started in 1776. What they mean by we hold these truths to be self-evident means that we've wrestled with, we've grappled with the entirety of human philosophy, and we've now come to understand that these are the things that are true. I want to briefly quote Descartes here, philosopher way back when, where he said this regarding the principles that we should consider first. We must commence with the investigation of those first causes, the first principles, which are called principles. Now, these principles must possess two conditions. In the first place, they must be so clear and so evident that the human mind, when it attentively considers them, cannot doubt their truth. We hold these truths to be self-evident. In the second place, the knowledge of other things must be so dependent on them, the first principles, as that though the principles themselves may indeed be known apart from what depends on them, the latter cannot nevertheless be known apart from the former. In other words, again, after long consideration, that is when the truth becomes clear. That is when the truth that all men are created equal, that the system should be designed to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Only after we consider all of these things do those things become truth and self-evident. Go ahead and play cut 3 here from Erika, where she continues on in that vein that the founders were thinking about. Watch this.
Charlie often said that without God, freedom becomes chaos. And he believed liberty could only survive when anchored to truth. And I remember in one of his speeches, he told the audience that the opposite of liberty isn't law. He said it's captivity. And that the freest people in the world are those whose hearts belong to Christ.
Which again is exactly true. I'm going to play another cut from Erika a little bit later that kind of hammers down that point a little bit more. But before that, we want to discuss what's going on a little bit later on in the Declaration of Independence, where it says, prudence will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. In other words, if you understand the self-evident truths that come from understanding the entire scope of philosophical and religious thought, specifically of Christian values, only then will you have the ability to discuss difficult topics with prudence. The government was not designed to go to the whims in this way and that way, and these people think this, and these people think men can be women, and these people think that criminals are actually the victims. All of that stuff is only possible when someone doesn't hold the self-evident truths that the founders wanted to uphold. With that, play cut 4, because this is where Erika, I think, really brings it home.
And he reminded us that in a world that tells us freedom is doing whatever you want to do, the real freedom is the power to live freely and to do what is right. And in one of his journal entries, he wrote that he wanted everyone to know that you can't have liberty without moral responsibility. Freedom divorced from faith eventually just destroys itself.
John Adams famously said that this country and this government was designed for a moral and religious people. And that is what Erika is hitting at so hard and so fervently, and what Charlie was fighting so hard to maintain. This country was designed on truths that are self-evident, on truths that have been wrestled with over the course of human history. And those truths became evident that all men are created equal, and freedom is the maximum priority for the government to uphold. And if you lose the course of where that freedom comes from, where those self-evident truths come from, you will lose your way entirely as an individual, but in this case, specifically as a country. This country was designed for a moral and religious people, and if we don't have that as collective society, we will lose the country. That is what Charlie was fighting so hard for. That is what I am so encouraged that Erika understands very, very deeply, and that is what we are continuing to do here on the conservative side of the political spectrum here in the United States of America. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We have wrestled with the thoughts and the philosophical diatribes of the past, and we've come to an understanding of this is what our priorities are. Freedom only works if a person can control themselves. If a person is free to do whatever they want, that is exactly what Erika said. The country and the individual devolves into chaos. I continue to be so impressed with Erika, again, in the face of unbelievable tragedy. I know I've mentioned that before, but her speech yesterday, I think, really continues to further the tone that Charlie was taking in trying to maintain the ideas and the ideals that the founders set forth to guide this country in the proper and correct direction. So, like I've said a million times, God bless Charlie Kirk, God bless Erika Kirk, God bless America. We are so encouraged by the continued direction of Turning Point USA, its new leader, and the direction of the conservative movement as a whole. I appreciate you. I appreciate you sticking with me through that. Again, probably more philosophical content that you probably see on this show, but I think that is so important that we all understand as this is the direction for the country and the conservative movement going forward.